Get higher, baby. Get higher, baby. Get higher, girl. Hey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Knights of the Pageless Library. And we have something very, very special for you today. We actually are interviewing Bronson Pinchot, which I am so starstruck. Bronson, how are you today?
I'm actually having a fantastic day. I'm having a lovely day. And ever since 9/11, my whole worldview is if you have a lovely day or even a lovely 5 minutes, you've gotten away with something. And that is my new worldview as of the last 20 odd years.
Awesome. That's great to hear. We really appreciate it that you came on our tiny little show here. So this is amazing for us.
What? It doesn't feel tiny.
Oh, that makes me feel so good. You have no idea.
I'll tell you, there's a marvelous line from, I don't know if it's from the movie Sunset Boulevard or if it's from the stage show or if it's from both, but there's a line in Sunset Boulevard which I think is meant to be ironic and kind of Desmond, but when you translate it to audiobooks, it's really quite moving and meaningful. She says something like, when she goes loony at the end and she's got her eyes are kind of half crossed and she's like, I love all those little people out in the darkness. But in audiobooks, once you get your zone, you realize that you're in a little tiny space. And I want to describe to you in detail the space I was in when I recorded the Hero's Guide. You're in a little tiny space. And when you start to get up ahead of steam and realize that all the people that will hear it might be in another uncomfortable space, whether they're home with the flu or whether they're on a long, boring car ride or train ride or something, it is a very expansive art form, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do think I know what you mean. And like someone like you, as like, in my opinion, you're the best narrator in the game. It's actually not even close. And you have such
Oh
a
my gosh,
wide range that you can do. Like, I feel like any accent, you just nail it. And especially like your German accent is so good because we have a lot of German family and like you are so spot on. Like your German accent is like perfect. And you do so many characters like that. They're all like iconic to me, and I find you so immensely quotable too. Like your performances always add so much to every book that you're in. When I see your name on a title, I'm just excited to hear what you're gonna do.
I appreciate that a lot. The funny thing about accents is it's all about just diving in and being naked, because the first time anyone ever asked me to do a German accent, I was being offered being invited to do the voice of the Volkswagen Beetle Max, and it was a big opportunity, and I thought, I don't do a German accent. What am I going to do? I want the job. And then I remembered that a girlfriend I had in the mid 90s had a little girl, and my girlfriend was a film director. She was busy all the time, and they got a nanny for the little girl who was things that Barbara did. Can you? And so I started with that, and it seemed to work. And then as I went along, and I go to these conventions and stuff, and the various CEOs would come over from Germany, and you just put it together. But really, in many cases, one little phrase is your gateway, and then the rest is just take a stand and sell it. The other day, I was doing voices for a new animated program called Strange Planet. And they said, could you do the whole thing again with an Australian accent? And I said, oh, that's one I don't do. And they said, could you do a bad Australian accent? And I said, hell yeah. So I did it, and they said, that wasn't bad. That was actually good. But it's mostly about, and everything in audiobooks is about jumping in. A lot of people have trouble they get scared about crossing gender. You know, how does a man doing a book play a female character, or how does a man play a child or whatever? And after you freak yourself out the first few times and say, oh, I don't sound very much like a woman, or I don't sound very much like a child, then you remember that when you're telling the story of what happened at Thanksgiving and you want to say what your mother said, you don't have to be the most believable 93-year-old Italian woman in the world. You just need to say what she said and kind of give the sense of how she said it. And that ends up being enough to carry it.
And
Yeah, for sure.
that's funny that you mentioned that you have you don't know how to do children, because especially like in the hero's guide, when you do Deep Robber, like you do such a good job of like making him sound like a little kid but still menacing at the same time. Like I don't know, I just find it so impressive.
The way that I learned to do children without stressing is there was a little girl in something whose mother was really, really, really troubled mentally. She was paranoid schizophrenic or something. And the little girl in this book, which was not the least bit funny, was I think they were going to take her away from the mother because the mother was so mentally ill. And the little girl was trying to convince her mother to act, to appear stable just for the interview with child services so that they could stay together. And the little girl's line was, "Mommy, it's okay. Just act like you're normal. It's okay." And that's what I did, because I realized it's not important. Oops. Are you still there?
Yeah.
It's not important to sound like a little girl. It's important to channel what a little girl's trying to do. And after I crossed that boundary, then I was fine doing everything, because I'm never going to sound like an 11-year-old boy, although I think like one. But you're never going to sound like an 11-year-old boy. You're never going to sound like a princess. But if you think about what they're trying to do or put across, it doesn't matter. I mean, I still have my baritone, even bass baritone vocal cords, but it turns out to be just about what that person, what that entity sometimes is. If there was a character in a book once that I remember saying to my engineer, okay, now I'm screwed, because the character lives in an enchanted forest and the character's name is Cuddle Bunny. What am I going to do with Cuddle Bunny? But, you know, I just decided to be as cuddly as I could. God, I just had a flashback. There was an audition once. They were introducing a new color of M&M. I don't remember what color it was. It was about 10 years ago. And the casting director said to me, "That was really good. Can you try it again and be just a little more chocolatey?" What does that even mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
But the thing is, it kind of means whatever it means to your unconscious. I mean, it's a great art form for remembering that performing is just trying. And I do believe very firmly that the root of all performing and storytelling and acting comes from how you were read fairy tales as a child. And my mother acted out all the characters to her utmost, and we had our favorites, and we would make her do them again and again. And I thought everybody's parents did that. Of course they don't, but my mother was super committed to making us laugh or be scared or whatever it was, and she acted them out beyond Meryl Streep level. And I didn't know till I was older that not every mom did that. And so that's, you know, it's like that reaching. I mean, of course she was never going to sound like a dragon or whatever, but you could watch her reaching for it, and it was great.
Awesome. And that's awesome to hear too. I'll have to keep that in mind when I'm reading stories to my children as well.
You know, when I was about 20, I really needed a job, and I answered an ad in the local paper. It said compassionate people needed for working with the multi-handicapped blind. And I thought, well, I've got compassion. I don't have any other skills. So I went and I was hired. And these were blind individuals who also had multiple other handicaps. Some of them had Down syndrome. They had blindness, and they had a minimum of 2 other handicaps. And I remember taking them to the park and reading them The Wizard of Oz. And it just occurred to me, because here in California, there are no cyclones. I picked each one of them up under the armpits when it came to the cyclone, and I twirled around and around and around and around with them as fast as I could, and then set them down on the ground again. And they got it, and I thought, yes, that's what storytelling is. I mean, I'm not able to pick up every single person I'm reading to, but if you can try to pick them, I mean, from that point on, these kids were going to follow it to the best of their ability, but at least they knew that Dorothy had been in a thing that went around and around and made you dizzy and took you to a magic place. And I know it sounds corny, but I can be corny. It's okay. I'm giving myself permission to be corny. But yeah, audiobooks are coaxing the listener onto a magic carpet and then just pulling the, letting out the clutch and going on a ride to the best of your ability. And sometimes it really works. And sometimes you're a crashing bore, or you go too far. The great thing about the Hero's Guide is that you can't go too far because it's all written way out there.
Yeah, it is. And that's the thing was when we first, I think the first series we listened to of yours was the Grim Noir Chronicles by Larry Correia.
Yeah.
And we were blown away by those. And I mean, you have a ton of range in those, but I didn't realize your range went even further until you had suggested we listen to the Hero's Guide. So that's why we picked that up. And yeah, we were just completely blown away by that.
I appreciate that. Now I have to tell you where I recorded the first one, because it's part of the fun of the book. The first one was in the home of an audio engineer / producer who was a dear friend of mine, and he was kind of a like an alternative guy. He had just inherited his grandfather's house, and the grandfather's house was built into a rock cliff. So the audiobook booth was hewn, 2 walls of it were out of a rock cliff, and the rock cliff was sweating. I mean, it was moist and it was cold and damp, and I was crunched in there. And part of what gave me the freedom to just go crazy with the book is he was in his strange little room. I don't know what it was like, but we were in this house. It was rainy season in Oregon. There were leaks all over the house. This rock wall was sweating, and something about it made me think, okay, you just go far away. And I knew he was giggling wherever he was, however many paces away, but there was something like, I'm in a cave. I'm in a sweating cave. And so I'm not going to be embarrassed by any choices I make. And off we went.
So cool. So cool when there's also an interesting story behind all of it. So awesome.
Well, there almost always is. First of all, I am claustrophobic. I'm so claustrophobic, I won't even fly unless I can get the aisle seat. I literally will not fly. And sometimes I'll put off a few flights and I finally get on and I have an aisle seat, and somebody will come up and say, this is my husband and we've been separated, and can we please have your seat so we can sit together? And it's excruciating as it is, I have to say, unfortunately, I can't help you. I can't sit, I can't, I'm first. And, they never really believe it. They think I'm being a diva or whatever. And it's like, no, I'm claustrophobic. Like some people are. My stepdaughter was so fair that she used to get sunburn through her clothes. And I was like, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm sorry that you are upset with me and you don't believe it and you think I suffer from claustrophobia. So there I am in a booth, my own home booth is even more claustrophobic than most, because I had to build it to fit within what was available here. But you use the story to take you away, and that's that. So now I'm going to let you ask me some specific questions about the book, since you have listened to it, because I'm talking very globally right now, and that could be excruciatingly boring.
Oh, absolutely not. It's not
I was
boring at
gonna
all.
say I'm very interested, so I think our listeners will be interested too. But I do want to ask you like a specific question. Like, how do you make, like, especially in the hero's guide, like the character Duncan, like how do you make him sound dumb? Like I that is really impressive to me.
I channel, you see, I was lucky enough at one point in my career, about 20 years ago, I did a play about a guy. It's called Fully Committed, and it was about a someone who was taking reservations at a restaurant that the world was ready to kill to get into. And the way the play is written is you're the only one on stage, but everybody that calls in, you turn into that person. So you're having you're the receptionist, and you're also the people calling in, and the same characters call in and call in and call in. So there were 38 different characters to prepare for that show. And as fate would have it, I went directly from that show into a show called Stones in His Pockets, where 2 characters play 16 people and they never leave the stage. So you've got to turn into 8 or 9 people, women, men, children, old men. And what I realized, okay, so whatever 38 plus 8 is, 46 characters, is that right? You get a little tag to hold on to, that on the stage would be a gesture. It would be, I would think of a painting that reminded me there was a lead character who was a beautiful movie star, a woman. And so I would think of a painting of the most beautiful woman I could think of, and then I would just do the neck. I would just lengthen my neck and I would turn into her. That was just a quick little tag. In audiobooks, there's a picture in my head of somebody. And I think what I was doing, there used to be a waiter at a health food restaurant I went to every day, and he was the slowest, dumbest, and I would always go in after the gym, so I was starving, and he was so dumb and so slow, and he would forget the order by the time he got to the kitchen, and he'd have to come back. And I think I based it on him. I remembered his eyes were so dull. Bless his heart.
So awesome. Do you spend a lot of time reading the books ahead of time to get very familiar with them before you?
No, I cold
Really?
read them like a violinist sits down and does a cold sight reading.
Oh, wow.
And that is how I've done better than 98% of the over 400 books I've ever done, including Grim Noir.
Yeah. Wow.
That is so impressive.
Yeah.
When I pre-read, there's something lacking. I mean, I'm reading these really long Upton Sinclair novels right now, and I pre-read the first one, which was 3.5 times the length of the Hero's Guide. And I always know what's coming, and I know what the surprises are, and it's a little bit less riveting for me than if what happens in most of the books is I take my very best guess, and after 400 books, my very best guess is usually spot on, even to the point where sometimes I'll see a character and I'll think he needs a gravelly voice, and literally 2 chapters later it describes his voice as work boots on gravel, and it's always eerie. Most of the time I just grab a hold of my Tarzan swing and swing right into it, and that has worked really, really well. Once in a blue moon I get caught and I have to go back, but very, very rarely. You just learn to have these instincts of what does the book need right now? What does the book need? Does it need a character who's sweet and warm, or does it need a character who's evil and hard? I'm almost always on the money. But on those books, I read them dead stone cold.
Wow.
And occasionally there was a book I read called Alien Phalanx, and there's an old warrior in it, and I picked this slow tempo for him that was almost unbearably slow. And then one chapter came along where the whole chapter was him telling a story of some battles he'd fought in long ago. And I looked at my engineer through the window and I went, uh-oh, because this whole chapter, this whole 10 or 20-minute chapter is going to be this super slow pace that I've chosen. But I had already established it, so I had to do it. And I thought, well, and then I get a letter from the author, Scott Sigler, saying that is my favorite character in the whole book. There was so much richness and layers. And I was like, really? And I told him the story and he said, no, it's all there. There's so many layers. I loved it so much. I was like, okay. Once in a blue moon, you are able to steal from yourself. There's a character in a previous book that works really well. And you can say, okay, this is so-and-so, but 10 years younger, or this is but I just wing it. I mean, you wing life. You don't know what's going to happen in life. You really don't. You can be sitting somewhere and someone will come up and talk to you and become a lifelong friend. So I tend to wing it. I don't recommend that when I'm teaching audiobook narrating, because it's the same as it's the same as a Nairobian runner saying to some rotund kid from Colorado Springs, just go for it. I mean, if you're born to run, you run, and if you're not, you have to take other steps. You have to limber up.
Sure. And I think that's why your narration is so good, because it clearly sounds just natural to me. I mean, that's the way it comes across, which is awesome.
I just like to take a running leap. It's really fun. And I remember once one of my favorite engineers who's become a lifelong friend, and there was a book written in the first person by a man with autism, and it's narrated by him. So I said, what else can I possibly do but give my best, autistic read? And he looked through the window at me and he said, you aren't really going to do this whole book this way. And I said, I am, because he's speaking. It's his book. But with any luck, because a lot of autistic people remember every single syllable that's ever been said to them. I said, when other characters speak, because it's him and it's his brain, I'm going to be able to give them extra richness, because he would have grabbed every single nuance. And so that's what happened. And people loved the book, and the author loved the book, and it was a gamble, but you got to gamble. And there were several characters in it who were people that looked after him. And I just made them as vivid as I could. And then I went back to a more colorless, deliberate thing, and it works. You gotta fall on your face. Sometimes I didn't with that, but occasionally one does. There was a book called Wise Blood that I did, and there was a character who lived on a park bench, and you've got to give every character a different voice so that people don't get confused, because books that are not written to be read are not like radio plays where it says Bronson said this and Ryan said that every single time. Yeah. So this character that lived on a park bench, and that the weather was described as cold. So I gave him a stuffy nose. Some people said, how dare Bronson Pinchot take this masterpiece and give this character a stuffy nose when it doesn't say he has a stuffy nose. Whereas some big publications like Publishers Weekly said this is what the author had to have intended, because it's exactly what she said she was writing whenever she complained that people took the book too seriously. So you just, I mean, who cares? Some people get in your face. But you've got to swing out there on your vine and see if you can catch another vine. Sometimes you splat.
Oh, that's so cool to hear. You, I mean, you have an extremely extensive amount of work that you've done between both narrating and acting. What, between those two types of things that you do, what would you say is your favorite out of those?
You mean in the genre of audiobook narrating or screen acting?
Yeah.
Okay. I will definitely say audiobook acting is like going to the gym every day. And I'll give you this example. I did a musical just a short time ago, and I hadn't actually sung on stage for 10 years. And my voice was just not popping. And I said to the musical director, I think you might have to fire me. My singing is not what it needs to be. And he said, we're not going to fire you, and you are going to be fine. And we went into a room. They took the cast and gave them a dance number to learn. And he said, come on, let's get back to the basics. And within 19 minutes, I was singing better than I ever had in my life. And he said to me afterwards, when a person doesn't sing for 10 years, it doesn't come back in 19 minutes. And the only thing I can tell you is I'm certain as a vocal coach that the exercise of doing audiobooks nearly every day for 13 years has given you incredible breath control and body consciousness, and that's what saved you. There's no other way. If you don't sing for 10 years, you can just open your mouth and sing after just a few exercises. So it's like the gym. I prefer screen acting because you can communicate things with your soul that you can't communicate in audiobooks because they can't see you, and they can't. In film, you can communicate things that not even the director or the author are aware of. You can communicate things that only the audience sees, and there's something amazing about that. I mean, it really is like making love. So that's what I prefer, because it's psychic. I mean, there's a psychic element to it. But audiobooks are a sensational way to work out and to discover things. I've discovered characters in audio that I didn't know I could do, and you don't have a choice. If you're in a play, you might even be able to talk to the dramatist and say, I can't do this character. This character is beyond me. Can you alter it a little? You might be able to do that, or in a movie. But in an audiobook, you must do what's written. The example I give people all the time is they're so committed to fidelity that in an audiobook, if a character is cold and he says, but I can't, and they will count the C's. And if you said, I can't, but the author only wrote, I can't, they'll make you redo it with two, they will.
Wow.
And it's a beautiful discipline, because as American actors, especially, we're always told, make it your own. And then that turns into a bad habit, because you always think that what you have in your back pocket is the ability to say, I want to rewrite that line a little bit or whatever. In audiobooks, that is absolutely positively not going to happen. Not one syllable is going to be changed, because in 95% of the cases, the book's already been published. So after doing many, many, many books where you're not allowed to change even a one syllable, and sometimes there are these drawn out things. There was a Georgia redneck who had stolen a bottle of champagne in a book, and the champagne was called Chateau Thierry. I do speak French, but I knew that a Georgia redneck who stole a bottle of champagne would call it Chateau Thierry. And so they sent it back and said, no, it's Chateau Thierry. I said, I'm well aware of that, but the character is not. That is not how he would say it. And they said, yes, but there's somebody here in the office who is French. And they said, it's got to be Chateau Thierry. I said, that is correct if you're French. I am not going to change it, because the character is a Georgia redneck, and the best he can do is Chateau Thierry. So it came back 5 times, and I just wouldn't do it. There's another one that's even better. There was a fantastic novella about a character who he had an art gallery. He sold paintings. He goes out in the street and he's stabbed right in the heart. He staggers back up to his studio and collapses. And then he's crawling across the floor, and he starts to hallucinate because of loss of blood. And he's looking at the paintings, and he can't tell if he's in one of the paintings or not. And then halfway across the floor to the phone, he dies right in the middle of a sentence. and the rest of the page is blank. And that's the end of the book, is the character clearly bleeds out, and right in the middle of a sentence, he dies. And it's very remarkable when you're reading the book that the page is just blank. It's right out. So the note came back, sounds incomplete. Thought sounds incomplete. And I said, guys, are you kidding me? Have you seen the book? Yes, but the thought sounds incomplete. I said, it is incomplete. He dies in the middle of the thought. Well, we need you to, I said, no, just no. And everybody was like, well, you're being, difficult. Won't you just give us one version of it? I said, no, because you'll use it. The author wants him to die in mid-thought. I died in mid-thought, and that's what we're going to use. And there was another book for tweens that took place in hell. And there was a drunken Scottish pirate dangling in the rigging of a ship in hell, doing these long drunken monologues. And the note came back, sounds kind of garbled at points. And I said, yeah, what part of drunken Scottish pirate in hell are you not grasping here? He's a drunken Scottish pirate in hell. I mean, even a drunk, or even a drunken Scot, or even a drunken Scottish pirate, but a drunken Scottish pirate in hell, I'm standing by it. I don't know.
Awesome. So just out of curiosity, when you say notes came back, so are these things like directly from the author themselves saying, hey, no, I think it should be like this? Or are these like your production team?
It is the quality control proofreader,
okay,
it is that person's job to look at what you've done, to listen to what you've done, looking in with intensity at the script, and to make sure that every word is as written. The only issues come up is when they're looking at the sentence or the phrase, and they're not looking at the overall storytelling. It doesn't happen that often to me anymore. And I have been known at times to be a brat and go to the author and say, what do you want to do here? I think the character should mispronounce that. There was another thing. When I was a little boy in the 60s, older people referred to Los Angeles as Los Angeles. That's what they did. It was a thing left over from the 40s. And I always thought it was weird when I was little, but it actually is marginally closer to the Spanish, Los Angeles. It's marginally closer to that than Los Angeles. It's still not very good Spanish, but Los Angeles is what they said. And I used to think it was weird. So I played a detective in Los Angeles in the 40s who was from the Midwest, and I had him say Los Angeles, and they said it back and said, no, it's pronounced Los Angeles. I said, grew up here, I know what it's called, but he's from out of town, and it's the 40s, and I'm going to have him say Los Angeles. Comes back, no, the name of the town is Los Angeles. And what was another one? There's a hotel in New York. Someplace, or I used to have the same makeup person as Demi Moore, and she used to tell me every day, Demi is furious because someone called her Demi, and that pisses her off. She's Demi. So I did a book about Angelina Jolie, and I referred to Demi all the way through as Demi, and it came back, no, it's Demi. I said, well, do you know her? Because I've been told by people who know her intimately that she wants Demi. And they said, yeah, well, it's Demi. I said, well, I know that up in Ashland, Oregon, I'm sure but I know someone who knows, and I'm just going to stick with, sometimes it's just, I don't know. It sounds bratty to say it, but sometimes storytelling has a different, you know what I'm saying? Storytelling is a different set of 3D glasses from not storytelling.
Well, I think, and I mean, I would say that's probably what makes you stand apart from most narrators we've ever listened to, though, is you clearly, just like saying that, it would sound like this. It wouldn't just sound like someone reading it. You are making the character, which is what's so awesome about it.
Well, one thing that I always say to I've taught audiobook narrating a few times. And one thing I always say is we need to come up with a different verb to describe what we're doing other than narrating, because narrating reminds me of two things. Number one, the voice in the old National Geographic educational film that says, and here we see the gazelle being chased by the lion, and the lion is eating its intestines. And so that's narrating. It's outside the action,
Sure.
totally outside the action. The other thing that occurs to me with narrating is somebody standing at a window and saying, oh my God, look at the neighbors. Oh my God, look at their kid. He looks like a drug addict. That's outside the action. And I don't like the word because it suggests that we are outside. And I always say to people, if you can, the first thing to picture is that if you're on the TV screen, even if someone's closer than they ought to be, you're still 3 feet from their brain. If you're on the movie screen, you're 30 feet from their brain. But if you're doing an audiobook and they've got headphones on, you're 5/8 of an inch from their brain. So remember that you're mostly inside people's brains, and try to come up with some other verb like I'm conveying the book, or I am the book, or I'm unfurling the book, not I'm narrating the book, because nobody wants somebody inside their brain saying, Ryan turned to his computer friend and said, no, that's outside. And it's confusing because my voice is inside. So if you're inside the brain, you try your best to be it. The same as if you talk to authors, they often will tell you that they had planned for the characters to do A, and the characters insist on doing B, because the book is unfolding in their heads. And then you try to let the book unfold in your listeners' heads. One of the nice things about the Hero's Guide was that it's the narration is very chatty and very bratty and very brisk, and the author is talking directly to the reader / listener in a very jaunty, friendly way. So that made it easier. Now, the books I'm reading right now are by Upton Sinclair, a fine writer, and he is such a writerly writer that the only way to do it is with a slightly heightened, educated, incisive voice, because it won't work any other way. And I keep trying to warm it up and make it, but it's just not how he's writing. He's writing in a different voice. He's, whereas I did Mark Twain's autobiography, which he dictated. Now I recommend you listen to that book. He dictated it from bed when he was old, and a secretary wrote it down in shorthand, and it's in his spoken rhythms. He jumps around. And so you have to read it as if you're thinking it up. And then we were a third of the way through the book. I said to my engineer, I've got him now, and we need to go back to the beginning. And he said, but we've spent 20 hours. I said, but I've got him now, and we must go back to the beginning. It has to sound like he's literally just making it up as he goes along. And he was the head of the studio, so he allowed me to do it. But that's what you look for if you can. But some writers are so literary, you can't. And then you have to honor what they did, which is very precise and very, you just have to honor what they did. You can't shove it around. You just can't. I mean, I've heard in the new Macbeth with Denzel Washington and everything that they've worked so hard to make the verse seem natural and seem conversational that it may not be ideal. I haven't seen it, but that's what I mean. When you're doing Shakespeare, at a certain point, you're going to have to remember that you're doing Shakespeare, and Shakespeare was always more advanced than his audience. Even the day it first came out, he was more advanced than his listeners. He was using words he made up. He was using big words. He was using foreign words. You can't shove it, but you can nudge it. Now, is that not a t-shirt?
That sounds great to me.
Right?
That's awesome.
To answer your question more specifically about Duncan, I sometimes visualize the thought of the character. And in that case, it's just coming to me now that his thoughts were kind of like string cheese that's been sitting out on a hot radiator, and that he just wasn't quite sure where the string led to. And then all of a sudden there'd be like, I did get a few reviews from families who said we couldn't stop laughing, and a couple that said it was excruciating whenever he opened his mouth. But I thought, yeah, it kind of would be excruciating to be around someone who was so effing dumb, and you would hold your breath till the other people open their mouths. And then I think with the little British guy, I forget his name, but I think I was thinking largely of Freddie Bartholomew, who is a child actor from the 30s who always played a kind of a well-meaning, prissy little thing. And you start there, and then it develops. You start with just a basic kind of ingredient. Like if you're making pancakes, you have to start with eggs and flour. And then as you go along, you're like, well, he's a little bit more like this, or he's a little bit more like that. And then by the time I got to the third book, they all had their own personalities, and they just told me what was what. When we recorded the third one, I was in an area of Pennsylvania where they were doing fracking. And those big fracking trucks would come through, and their CBs were so strong that it would come right through my headphones. So we stopped every other line, and we had to go back and re-record. And I thought, this is going to suck. But it actually won the Audie that year for best male narrator, which had taught me a lesson. I thought, you can't sit there and judge just because you have to do every single line twice. Don't be having don't have a self-pity party because people really liked it. I don't know. You got to just keep, and there have been times that I've been reading books, children's books, and I think, oh my gosh, this is too gory for kids. What is this? This is horrible. But you just give it your very best spin, and then the reviews come out and say, wow, this is so meaningful. It's like, okay, you just, it's good that way. It's a good training for your mind, because you're not allowed to judge and you're not allowed to change it. You have to do it as written, as AZZ written. It's very, very good. It's very, very good rigor for your brain. And I'm sure that my brain has abs.
Speaking of which, is it, you got in really good shape just the last couple of years, right? Like,
I've been in and out of shape all my life. I'm as my mother once said in her Brooklyn accent. Wait, can I say naughty words on your show?
Oh,
absolutely.
Okay, well, I have to tell you my favorite story. All right. So I use whoever pops into my mind. And there was a book I was reading recently. My mother's a 93-year-old Italian heritage from Brooklyn. And she's 4'8", and she's pretty feisty, and she has this little voice. So there was a book where it was several different galaxies, and each one had its own kind of ruler or tyrant. And the one of them had an empress, and she was small, and she was over 90. So it didn't say anything else about her. So I just gave her my mom's voice. And my mom's voice is like, sweetheart, if you're going to go out, please comb your hair. Please do it for me. So I gave this empress my mom's voice, and it was fine. And every once in a while, my mom would come into the audio studio and say, I made some cookies. I don't know if they're on your diet, but maybe your engineer, John, would like some. And I'd say, Mom, his name is Kyle. Maybe Kyle, what's his name? I could just leave the cookies, Mom. So anyway, we're reading along. I gave my mom's voice to this empress. Then there's this moment where they have to evacuate this little 90-plus-year-old empress in a cargo ship. And because it's a cargo ship, there's nowhere for anyone to sit but the pilot. And the pilot is a young woman who's very chipper and positive and optimistic. And the only way to keep it's a cargo ship. So they tie a rope around this little empress's ankle, and she's kind of floating in weightlessness and for many hours. And at the end of one chapter, the perky young pilot says to her, "You're doing great there, ma'am. You're doing just great. This is great. I love your energy." And then the Empress has a line back to her, which I did in my mom's accent. And the line she says back to the perky pilot is, "Sweetheart, can you do me a favor?" And the pilot says, "Yes, ma'am." And she says, "Can you fuck yourself to death, sweetheart?" So I did it as my mom, and my engineer and I, first of all, he didn't think it was in the book because he was looking at the wavelengths and he was looking at, and he thought I was joking. And then he looked at it and he said, "Sweetheart, can you fuck yourself to death?" And so that was just a little jewel that came down the pike because I had picked my mom's voice and stuck with it. And that's what we got.
So awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
But it really, we could not stop laughing. Then there was the time that I got a book that was soft porn. It was soft porn, and I did it under a pseudonym. And it was about a cyborg on another planet who, the way it worked in this particular book was that they gave women convicts on Earth the choice to either stay in prison for life or go to this other planet and be sex slaves for these cyborgs. So that they get this, I mean, so it's obviously, nasty. So the woman gets transferred to this planet, and then she immediately gets this chain around her neck, and the chain is got transmitters in it so that her cyborg owner can read her thoughts. And she's only there to have sex with him because it's a nasty soft porn book. And at some point, unlike the other cyborgs, he decides he wants to try to understand her. So he riffles through her memories and sees that she likes to surf. And I don't think there's any water on his planet. So his line was something like, "I could not understand how a planet could have so much excess water that my mate could take a board and float on it." And I was like, well, that's pretty interesting. And then it was like, then I stuck my prong into her to make babies. And so we were doing fine with it. But my engineer, I've got 3 engineers, and each one's very different. One of them is like just an old buddy, and we turn into frat boys when we're recording. We laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed, and we couldn't stop. And then we tried to record it again, and we couldn't do it. And we lost a lot of money because you've got to get on with it. It was like, and then he's got some kind of like second in command, and they've got to be mating every second. So whenever the cyborg is busy, his second in command has got to have her and mate with her. And just, I don't know how we got through it, but it was a lot of belly laughs. But I've been getting in and out of shape since I was 25. And during the pandemic, I got really heavy, and then I got into veganism, and I got really light, and now I'm not heavy, but I wouldn't go shirtless and Playgirl or anything.
Well, I'm assuming it's your YouTube channel, right? You put some videos up on there. I was watching those earlier today.
I don't have a YouTube channel.
You don't? Oh,
no.
Maybe that one's not yours then. So if you have Instagram, you put little short clips up, 20 seconds, 30 seconds or so?
I do sometimes, yeah.
Oh, well, then just so you know, I think someone's on YouTube taking them and putting them on there because it's on there.
That's okay.
If it makes you feel better, they don't have tons of views, so they're not doing a very good job of stealing them.
Well, God bless them. Now, looky, I am getting, I can't see what they're saying, but I'm getting a lot of texts from my sister, which may very well have to do with my mother. So I should start to wrap this up. I should let you ask me a couple more questions, and then I will shut up.
Oh, Bo, go ahead. You got something else for him?
Bo, go. That's a t-shirt. Bo, go. Just on the front. Bo,
I mean,
go.
there's just one thing that I've always wanted to say to you is like that you have a line in Spellbound that I find like immensely quotable. You have this character, Whisper, she's the French lady, and Lance like brings a rat in, and she does "oh, it is disgusting." That is one of my favorite things that I would not like if I didn't tell you that I would feel ashamed of myself. Like that is I quote that all the time.
I've got to tell you something funny about those books. Larry Correa became a great friend, and he gave me the greatest compliment of all, which was, he said, by the time he got to the second or third one, he said he couldn't remember how he had originally heard the characters in his head. He heard me in his head. When he would write what a character would say, he would heard me, which is truly one of the great compliments. But anyway, there was a minor character in one of them. I think she was in the first one, then she wasn't in the second one, and she popped up in the third one, and we were under pressure, and I couldn't go back and find her. So I think in the first one she had a slight Eastern European accent. She wasn't in the second one, and then the third one she either didn't have any Eastern European accent, or it was the other way around. So I wrote to Larry and I said, "What should I do?" And he said, "Oh, screw them if they can't take a joke. She's affected, and she decided she wanted to sound." I mean, he was just on board with, like, just don't stress it. He's such a sweet guy. But that's what I mean about the great relationship between narrators and writers. They never doubt that you are committed to reading exactly what they wrote, and therefore they're much more open, and they chat with you, and they become, where is in film, or stage, there's a certain wariness, which I don't blame them for, a certain wariness, because the writers are always thinking you may alter what they wrote or put a spin on it that they don't like. And then they've just been kind of, they get used to the the abuse, really, the artistic abuse, because in those media, the performer often has more leeway than an author feels perfectly happy with. But there's a whole different thing in audiobooks. They always, it's great. I wish more actors could experience it, but I mean, they know you're going to do your best to do what they wrote. And once in a blue moon, someone who likes you will say, "I did say this character was the biggest butt wipe on the planet, but he's so butt wipey that it's distracting." And some of my fans are saying that it's too. And so I've re-recorded entire characters. It's okay. So as long as somebody gives you the cues and tells you where to find the character, it's fine. I've done that 2 or 3 times. It's fine.
That's awesome.
It's just, I have to say, it is a really, really wonderful medium for interacting with writers and having them know in their bones that you will not deviate and you will not take liberties. And it's a beautiful thing. Of course, writers are wonderful. I don't have any friends that are actors, really. I don't really trust them because they're just weird. But as a writer, no, I don't. I've got one dear friend that's an actor, but we don't ever talk about acting. They're just they're like flies on windowsills. You just got to smack them and hope they die. But as a writer myself, writers are wonderful. They make the world. And so in this art form, you are not considered, just in this one art form, you're not considered the enemy. You're considered an ally. And it's wonderful. It's delightful. And you're absolutely assumed to be the ally. It's assumed you won't take liberties and things. So it's nice.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. And the reason that we wanted to get you, and we're interested in getting more and more narrators and stuff on our show if possible, is to get this kind of insight stuff, because it's one thing to listen to the books and really enjoy them, but it's a whole nother thing to actually get to know the person behind all that stuff and the person who really brings these stories to life. So
I'll tell you one thing I've always really wanted to do, which is to get, and if you do it, I'll be more than happy to, is to take a key character or even a little character like the French whisper lady, and get the author, get the audio sample, and get the narrator, and just play the sample and have the two of them discuss it. Because oftentimes the author will say, that is exactly what I heard in my head, and I was shocked when Bronson did it. Or the first time I heard it, I was like, what the hell is that? And then my wife said, no, that's really great. Occasionally also books are written in the first person, and especially when they're nonfiction. And the best compliment you can get is the author will say, well, I really loved what you did, but it didn't sound anything like me. But my wife said it was like hearing me talk, so it's really fun. That's a really fun thing. That would be the best thing is, just let a character do their little monologue and then say to the author, what did you think when you first heard that? Because sometimes I didn't know what the hell I was listening to, or that's exactly what I heard in my head, or it's nothing like I imagined, but now I can't picture it any other way. And then the narrator will say something like, well, that's just my mom. Or,
Right.
Or that's what I think is really marvelous. And I will tell you in closing, there's a fantastic and very well regarded narrator named Scott Brick. Of course, you're familiar with Scott's. So Scott, I knew of, and I didn't know his face. So I was giving a lecture about audiobook recording, and it was mostly narrators. They were would-be narrators in the audience. But I didn't know Scott was there because I didn't know his face. I just knew of him. So I was talking about how you take the writing and you internalize it and you get the rhythms and how you create characters and everything. And then he raised his hand and said, what if the writing is just sheer crap? And I said, oh, then you're fucked. And and everybody in the room knew that it was Scott Brick. I didn't, but they thought I did. And so he came up and we started to rap about how all the rules go out the window if the writing is just junk, and how you're on your own and there's really almost no way to make it work. I'll give you my favorite example. There was a book, I don't know who wrote it. I don't know if it was a pen name, but it was obviously written by someone for whom English was not their first language. It was two secret agents of an attractive man and an attractive woman who'd been assigned to pose as husband and wife, and they'd never met each other. But of course, because they were so attractive, they were going to fall in love. That was clear. So they get into this hotel room, and because they're sure their room is bugged, they have to take off their clothes and get into bed. And so the line was, which side of the bed do you want? Said she, as they took off their clothes and found the attractiveness of them. Okay, that's not English.
No, it's super
So,
awkward.
and it's beyond awkward. It is, it is literally like taking a rusty scimitar to the English language. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, should I correct it? No, you don't do that. Should I send a note to the publisher? No, because the rest of the book is just as clunky. So I just did it. And I just committed as if that was the only way to say it. Which side of the bed do you want? As they notice the attractiveness of them. I just live it, just wade in. It was just the worst prose ever. But just dig it. I mean, it was, there's only two ways to do it. One is to be prissy and say, I know better. That's not proper grammar. And the other one is to just embrace it. And then try not to get that particular, but yeah, if it's not thought through, if it's not felt, and if it's not well realized, you're basically up the creek. But I'm very fortunate that many books I read are deeply felt. And then you just, there's one you should listen to. It's called These Silent Woods. And it's all the internal monologue of this man. And it was written by a woman. I just had to check and recheck that it was written by a young, I don't know if she's Eurasian. She's an American of Eurasian descent. She wrote the book as a Southern white ex-convict who's holed up in the woods with his daughter and afraid of being discovered. It is so well observed that all I had to do, as I told my engineer, was brush my teeth and show up. And people are raving about this book. And I did next to nothing because this young genius got inside this guy's head and just got it so right that all I needed to do was open my mouth and take a breath and not burp. So that's what happens when it's really, really fine. And when it's not, you don't get invited on podcasts.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again, Bronson. We really appreciate it. We won't take up any more of your time. We know you're real busy.
All right. Well, I'm happy to join you anytime.
Well, we really appreciate it. Again, we're blown away by the fact that you're here. It's so awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Shucks.
It's insane. Like,
All right,
this
y'all
is like a
behave
dream come
yourselves.
true.
Oh, it's your dream come true. It's my wet dream come true. Now you behave yourself. I'm gonna see what my sister needs. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks again, Bronson.
Yeah, thank you so
Bye,
much.
guys. Bye.
Wow.
Yeah, that is so
We're,
awesome.
we're still going here, but like, oh
We
my
are still
god,
going.
like Bronson is such a good guy. I can't believe he took the time to be here with us. That is just incredible. I really
Yeah.
hope I hope the listeners really appreciate that. And he was actually showing us his face that whole time, and I was just like entranced just watching him.
Yeah, and it's just so everybody else knows, because there won't be any video with this, but yeah, it was just, he's just on his phone, just chilling, and
Well,
you know,
Yeah, the opening was him like, hang on, I gotta get a pillow, and he just walks through his apartment with us.
yeah,
It was oh my god, like holy cow. I'm still
And honest-
processing. I can't believe it.
yeah. And again, my face hurts because I was smiling the whole time. I couldn't stop smiling during all of that.
Wow.
Just crazy good insights into the industry, right? Like into the
Yeah,
audiobook
and
industry.
how does he not read ahead? Are you kidding me?
I know. I was shocked by that too.
I know Oliver said the same thing, but it's like it feels like these characters are born from him. Like
Yeah. Like workshopped, like they worked
yeah,
on it for
like,
a long
like
time.
he's been
Yeah.
a long time, and it's like, oh no, I just started reading, and this is what I thought he should sound like, and that's how he is.
Yeah,
It's
and
like,
that is incredible.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I couldn't have said thank you enough to him. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I worked really hard to get him on. Sort of. I just kept bugging him through emails once I found his
Yeah,
email.
pester people.
So and the crazy part is before he agreed to be on here, I knew he was famous, okay, but until he agreed to be on here, I didn't know how famous he was. So
Yeah.
once he agreed to come on, and I started realizing, oh my gosh, this is a person with their own legitimate IMDb page. They have a true record of like Hollywood level things. It's honestly insane that he was on this little teeny tiny podcast in the corner of the internet. So
Yeah, wow. Whew.
yeah, I mean, I don't know what else we can say. That's obviously nothing we can say at this point is going
Yeah,
to be
now the
worth
boring
listening
part of the
to. Yeah.
podcast.
No, yeah. So if anybody is still listening, thank you. We appreciate it. Yeah, and again, huge thank you to Bronson. It's so awesome that he would agree to come on such a small show and talk to us.
Yeah.
And I just hope maybe sometime we get to do it again.
Yeah, because that was exhilarating.
It really
Like,
was.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep this one running too terribly long. So, I mean, you got anything else to add on this one?
No, thank you all for listening, and thank you for the listeners who are probably like, holy shit, Bronson Pinchot was on this show. Yeah, he was.
Yeah, and for those of you who are like double clicking, you're like, wait a minute, what show am I listening to again that Bronson Pinchot is on? We yeah, we appreciate the listens. And again, I couldn't say thank you enough to Bronson for doing that for us.
Yeah, if you guys hated this episode, I guess like email us at kotpl.pod@gmail.com and or loved it or anything, or if you're a fellow narrator who's like, I'd like to be on your show, please like let us know. We will make time for you anytime that you want to be on here. We will make it happen.
Yeah, we would love that actually, because I honestly think stuff like this, even though we didn't set out to do this, I think this is important because as someone who loves audiobooks, this just gives a whole nother level to, that media for me.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I can't really necessarily describe it, but just understanding now kind of what goes in to the things he does and to the performance he does. It's just so cool to know him on a different level now. And that will translate to when I listen to his books, honestly.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna listen. I just listened to the whole Grim Noir Chronicles. I might listen to it again just because I want to hear some more Bronson Pinchot. Like
it was very cool too to hear him make that distinction, and I'm glad he said it because we know subconsciously that it's not necessarily narration. They are called narrators, but I'm so glad he made that distinction. They are more or less voice actors, because when someone's narrating a book and when someone is vested and is acting out that story. And he is a prime example of that. And it's very awesome that when he teaches narration, that's what he tells those people. You are not necessarily narrating something because narrating will be boring. So
right, you have like that separation, which he has none of when he does his books. It's like he said, he's in your head.
Yeah. Oh, that was so cool too to hear him say that. I mean, and he's right. When you're in somebody's headphones, you're about as close to their brain as you can get.
Yeah,
so
like it is a very intimate thing. And
yeah,
oh my God.
It's so cool to hear him say too how he embraces that stuff. Like those are the things he's thinking of while he's recording. And it really does show in his recording.
It's crazy that he's like, yeah, this is like I kind of treat it like it's just working out for my actual passion, which is normal acting. It's like, but you're so good at it. You're amazing at this.
That was so cool though to hear him say that. And I never really thought about that before. When you're narrating a book, you don't get to take any liberties. The only thing you can change is the characters' voices or the inflections. That's it. So that's interesting to hear him say that he enjoys like screen acting and stuff more in the sense that you can change things on a little bit more, on a little bit of a level. Whereas with the book, you're tasked with reading it off the page. So that's very interesting to hear.
We got to wrap this one up. I could gush for another couple hours.
I could too. It's crazy, but yeah. Again, seriously, thank you anybody for listening. And even if this is the only episode you show up for, we still appreciate you listening.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
The only thing we would ask is that you 1 star, 5 stars, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever you think we deserve. Please leave that and share your thoughts with us. We would really like to hear them.
Yeah, we would for sure. And I had something else I was going to say, but I don't remember anymore.
That's all right. We can wrap this one up. We'll save it for next time.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you in the next